I think there's a connection between the numbers on the board that Juliet saw and the code to get inside the server room vault. We even see markings on the wall showing that someone was attempting different codes to get inside. There's a lot to unpack in this episode, so give this video a thumbs up one time for Judge Meadows, and let's just dive into the video. The episode starts off with Juliet and Solo. While Juliet is trying to do her engineer thing, because Silo 17 is flooded, she wants to find a way to supply herself with air so that she can dive underwater and access other parts of the silo. While she's doing this though, Solo is talking about the circus and elephants talking her head off. While it is very annoying, what Solo is doing here is giving us a lot of information about what's inside the silo, and more specifically, what's inside of the server room. It's not just his conversation with Juliet here, but also Bernard's conversation with Judge Meadows at the end of the episode, when he's describing to her the animals that she's seeing. It's similar to the way Solo was describing to Juliet what an elephant is. And remember last episode when Juliet was telling Solo why she didn't clean, and she explained to him what she was seeing in her helmet was a lie, and she described to him what she saw, and just off the description alone, Solo knew she was talking about birds.
There were like a bunch of creatures that were going across the sky.
Oh, birds, they're called birds.
And Juliet didn't know what birds were either. What this leads me to believe is that inside the server room, there's some sort of supercomputer database with all sorts of information on the outside world. To me, that's the only way Solo and Bernard would know about these animals, since nobody else in the silo knows about them. Even Judge Meadows, who has some information on the outside world, we saw later in the episode when she was talking to Lukas about the stars and she explained to him what they were. It shows that she has some knowledge on what they are. But she didn't know about the VR headset, nor did she know about the animals she'd be seeing in there. But to me, the most interesting thing about this scene is Silo finally gave us a date. And now we can start to piece together what year does the story take place in. Because Bernard was telling Meadows the visuals that she's seeing in the headset come from Costa Rica circa 2018. So if we take that year 2018 and we add 140 years to it, and the reason I'm adding 140 years to it is because in season 1, we learned that in Silo 18 that the rebellion happened 140 years ago, which is why Silo 18 celebrates Freedom Day, while Silo 17 celebrates Founders Day. So if we add the 140 years to 2018, we get the year 2158. But remember back in season 1, between episode 1 and 2 with Holston's flashback, there was a time skip of about 3 years. So we add another 3 years to that. Instead of the year 2158, we get the year 2161. And at minimum, that's the year that Silo takes place in. Granted, it could take place much later. The reason I'm sticking to 2018 is that's the date we got. I'm going to assume that everything went to shits right after 2018. So I'm going to go with the assumption that Silo is taking place in the year 2161 at minimum. But guys, if you agree with me or disagree with me, let me know in the comments section below. And I have an elephant's memory, so I'm always going to remember to tell you guys to click the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Which ties back to the conversation Solo was having with Juliet about elephants. Notice even at the end of the episode when Solo comes back out of the vault, he's talking to Juliet about the elephants again. This episode makes it a specific point of emphasis to focus on his knowledge of these animals, just like Bernard's knowledge, while also telling us that Solo has been alone in the server room since he was a child. Because in this episode, while Juliet is still trying to find a way to supply herself with air underwater, her and Solo make their way to a classroom, and in that classroom, we see a board with a bunch of different number combinations. At first, I didn't think anything of this until Solo ran back into the server room later on in the episode when he was panicking, and he was having issues putting in the right code. So it got me thinking, what if those numbers were somebody trying different combinations to the code of the server room? What really reinforced this for me was, look right here, when Solo's standing next to the door of the server room, you see on the wall someone was marking down attempts at trying to crack the code, trying to get into that server room, which would explain where all of Solo's paranoia come from, which adds to my theory that there may be someone else in the silo. But it also made me think of a different theory. What if Solo isn't the person that was initially in the silo and he was the person who figured out the code? But that's just a theory I'm working on. Let me know how you feel about that one in the comment section below. But while also inside that classroom, we see that Solo starts to have vivid memories about the kids in this classroom, showing us that Solo has been in that server room since he was a child, which tracks what Bernard said about the revolution in Silo 17 happening over 25 years ago. And it also explains Solo's behavior. He behaves like a kid, and he also is super anxious to run back to the silo, Even when they're in the classroom, he's paranoid and anxious about forgetting to lock the silo door. But that shouldn't matter if him and Juliet are the only two people in the silo. And like I said in my last video, I don't think they're the only two people in this silo, especially since this episode confirmed that if you can navigate around the water, you can access other parts of the silo that's totally dry and habitable, which also tracks with Solo's behavior. In last week's episode, Solo told Juliet that he left food for her to confirm that she was real, showing us that Solo has seen other people around the silo, and the bodies from last week's episode pretty much confirming that there has been people in the silo after the rebellion. Since Solo's keeping things from Juliet, he could also be keeping this information from her because he clearly doesn't want anyone having access to the information that's inside the silo, which ties into Bernard and Judge Meadows. What's interesting about that whole dynamic is while Bernard wanted Meadows to be his shadow, there's clearly things in the order as well as inside the server room that she doesn't know yet, and things that she doesn't want to know because she was his shadow, and after she learned whatever she learned from the order, she no longer wanted to be his shadow anymore. While Sims, on the other hand, wants so desperately to be Bernard's shadow, and he's the most likely candidate because he moves just as slimy as Bernard moves. In this episode, Sims flat out tells Bernard that he's been watching him in Meadows, and I feel like the reason he did that was a power play to show Bernard that he has an information circle. He knows everything that's going on in the silo. He may not know what's inside the server room or what's in the order, but he knows everything else in the silo. Even things Bernard doesn't know, like how Meadows is supposed to meet with Mechanical. And Sims this episode shows that he's willing to do whatever it takes and he can influence anybody, especially with all the connections he has. For example, his wife being a former member of Judicial had inside intel on Meadows, which is why he came up with the idea to get her impeached in the first place, to force Bernard and Meadows' hand. Not just that, but last episode, he was the one that brought back the retired enforcer that killed Coop, reinforcing what I said about him having connections on every level of the silo. He just doesn't have the information that's in the order or the server room, and that's the information he wants, and that's why he was hating on Judge Meadows so hard, because Meadows has some of that information. And we saw this clearly when Meadows was talking to Lukas. I want to take a moment to shout out Lukas. The fact that Lukas could deduce that the world was rotating around the stars from just the cafeteria screen alone shows just how smart he is. I feel like Meadows understood that, which is why she threw him a bone and gave him the information that she gave him and sent him back to the mines. The reason Meadows did this is she wants to go out. She wants to see what the outside world's about. That's what she's been craving this entire season. And the fact that she got to talk to somebody about it, and Lukas essentially reaffirmed her desire to go outside. Under normal circumstances in the silo, we know for a fact that you don't share that type of information with people in the silo. Bernard would have probably blew a gasket had he found out that's what she was talking about with Lukas. But Meadows covered her tracks well. She sent Lukas back to the mines, and by the time Lukas is finally free, she'll be long gone. Just not in the way that she thought she would be, because Bernard poisoned Judge Meadows. The main reason he did this was because he realized that she really wanted to go outside, and Bernard is going to follow the order by the book. Meadows has been preaching to him the past few episodes to try a different approach. Don't follow the order so strictly. We see Meadows herself is starting not to follow the order. That's why she didn't want to become his shadow. She didn't want to be beholden to the order, especially after she learned about Salvatore Quinn, the head of IT during the rebellion 140 years ago, a secret that she took to her grave rather than tell Bernard. What's really interesting is that the hard drive that Juliet had last season has files in there that goes against the order, that has someone who's a part of the establishment like Meadows go against the very laws of the order that she swore to follow. But it's while she's poisoned and dying that he starts to tell her about the animals, the same animals we talked about earlier in the video, which confirmed to me again that there is a secret database inside the server room that has all sorts of information that no one else has access to, which also makes me wonder just how advanced the systems in that server room are. Can the two silos communicate with one another, which would explain how Bernard knew exactly what went down in Silo 17 25 years ago. But also how Solo knew which silos were close to him, which adds to the theory that I've been talking about, that Juliet's gonna find a way to communicate with both silos, especially now that she's finding ways to go underwater. Guys, remember, all the way underneath the silo, there's still a hidden door down there. If they can get down there and open it, I still think that is what connects the other silos to one another. But back to Bernard, he killed Meadows in order to frame Mechanical for it. Because this episode we found out every time there's a rebellion, it's always blamed on Mechanical. Knoxx and Shirley figure out the names that are written on the wall in the room beneath the silo belongs to every generation of Mechanical that was snuffed out by Judicial. It goes back to episode 2 when we find out what's in the order. The order as itself has a specific guideline on how to deal with rebellions. Always blame Mechanical, which brings me back not only to Rebellion on Silo 17, But back in season 1, when we learned about the initial rebellion in Silo 18, the one that happened over 140 years ago, that rebellion was also most likely blamed on Mechanical. And all of this is starting to make me think that the Silo may be a social experiment. And not just because of the process of blaming rebellions on Mechanical, but also because Walker walked up the stairs for the first time in over 25 years. And here we go again with the 25 years being a basis. Over 25 years ago was also when the rebellion on Silo 17 happened. It was also when Judge Meadows stopped being Bernard's shadow. And that was also the last time Walker walked up those stairs. And whenever there's a pattern like that, I tend to think of social experiments. Because when Bernard frames Knoxx for the death of Judge Meadows, the way that the people bought the Kool-Aid that Sims was selling was like, wait, you mean to tell me you guys actually believe that Knoxx went in there in the 2 minutes that he was in there, he killed Judge Meadows and walked out just that fast? And they believed it, showing me that I think this is some sort of system of control, which makes sense as to why Bernard is following the order to the T, which makes sense as to why Solo is so paranoid about letting anyone inside the server room. But maybe that's just my paranoia. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it in the comment section below. And guys, that's my thoughts about this week's episode of Silo. So give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and let me know your thoughts about this week's episode. And don't forget to check out some of the other videos on this channel. But guys, that's it. Until next time, peace.